Hello, everyone, and welcome to the portfolio contest, the culmination of the, not contest, the portfolio judging. Back to where I was, the culmination of the 2023 photo contest. So, this is the big grand prize, the one where the winner and to a lesser extent second place get to take bragging rights for the entire year. So, first up, as I think I do every year, if I'm going to put you guys through this, I should be putting myself through this as well. So we're going to start here with the portfolio I would have submitted were I entering this contest. My first shot here is the action shot. This is a bumblebee on a flower. And my first criticism of this is that I absolutely missed focus by a hair. It was still one of my best shots of the year, but if you look at the feet of the bumblebee that are like right at the flower, you can see those are really sharp. And then the eyes, a bit soft. They're behind it. So, look, I was using I think this was the Zuiko 28mm f3.5 on a macro adapter. This is really magnified. That adapter was racked all the way out. My depth of field on this was very, very shallow. So, all told, it does drive me nuts every time I see this photo now. And I'm like, dang it, the eyes. Oh. So anyway, but, one of the things with an action shot, the reason I would have submitted this one is that action doesn't have to be like something dramatic and far away. This is the action of a bumblebee taking off from a clover or similar thistle type flower. So anyway, this is what I would have sent in. For architecture, from Old Town Bilbao, we have a photo of the old theater. And I talked in one of the other videos about trash cans driving me nuts and stuff like that. We're going to get to that in a second with this one. One of the things about this photo is this was my second best photo of 2023. It looks so incredibly fake. Like, it's not. I was there, I took it, and I took it with the 20mm f2.8 Sony on my A7 IV. Like, it's just, there is something about the lighting on the building and the detail and the structure that is just like, it looks like a rendering. Anyway, I'm going to zoom in here over to the left, and I want to show you something about what I said about trash cans, right? I'm going to show you the lengths that I go to deal with some of these nitpicky things. There is this angled little bit of guardrail down on the left, and we're going to zoom in really close, and it looks really pretty normal at first, but something's kind of weird, you might notice. There's this shadow over on the left that isn't cast by anything. That was cast by some trash cans. The way that I did this was I went over to the next row over of railing, and I masked it. I copied it. I brought it over to the left here, and then I proceeded to distort it and warp it to fit the shape of the railing I was replacing, and then did a little bit of stretching and clone brushing on the sidewalk to blend the lines of the sidewalk together. And you can see there by the railing above it, that silver railing where the bikes are, and the white box there, you can see where the work wasn't perfect, but I think that's the kind of detail that most people aren't going to notice at first anyway, especially with everything else that's going on in the photo. That took me 3.5 hours to do. Next up, for black and white, this is what I would have submitted this photo of this guitarist, actually sitting not too far away from where that previous photo was taken. This guy was at the church that's sort of in the center of Old Town Bilbao. A couple days later, I'd say 2-3 days later. And he was playing music, and honestly don't know if he was a resident or just trying to raise money for travel or what, but he played well. And I was happy to throw a handful of euro coins into his guitar case. The way that I took this photo, same lens, the Sony 20mm 2.8 and the A7 IV, I had it on silent shutter, face priority autofocus, and burst mode. And as I went to put his money into his guitar bin, I held my thumb down on the shutter button and just trusted that one of the images would turn out. About 5 of them did. This was the one I liked the most. For the landscape entry, this is my shot of the eclipse over Mount Bierstadt this past year. And let me just tell you, I spent the better part of 5 hours trying to get rid of the banding in the sky and could not do it, and was very displeased by the banding result in it. This still was my best photo of the year, but I'm not thrilled with the sky still. So the way that I did this was I showed up early. The eclipse was like, noonish, I think it was. And so we were there at 6 a.m. And the clouds were over Bierstadt. So I took a series of about 300 shots of the clouds moving over Bierstadt to get that blurry cloud motion. And then we hung out because it was pretty clear the clouds weren't going to stick around for the eclipse. And I really honestly had been hoping that they would, because I wanted to fill that entire sky with cloud trails. So anyway, so the mountain and the clouds were taken around 6 to 6:30-ish a.m. And then those were taken on the Sony a7 IV again with, I think, the 31 millimeter Pentax Limited. And the width of the photo was the landscape orientation of the sensor. That this photo is 7,008 pixels wide. And the reason all that banding is in the sky is because I made the sky from scratch and created a gradient that matched the tonal range of the sky as it was during the eclipse, which is where the banding comes in. So this isn't an issue with the sensor. It's an issue with something that I did wrong in creating the sky. So then the photos of the sun and moon transit were taken with the Takumar 500mm f4.5 on the a7 IV, again, using a solar foil filter, to protect the camera. Still just today, I actually found a slight mark on the shutter curtain that makes me think the camera wasn't completely protected by that filter. Anyway, so shutter curtain's fine, but there's just a little area on it that looks like something might have gotten melted in the size of a pinhole. So glad I had a camera with a shutter. Moving on. So I took this series of 700 eclipse photos just in rapid succession throughout the entire thing. And then I opened them all up in the folder and then selected ones at set intervals to show an even progression of the moon in front of the sun at that set interval rate. Then at the same time as I was doing all that, I had the Sony a7S II. I don't remember what lens I had on it. I might have switched the 31 millimeter over to it. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's what I did. I set that then to portrait orientation, framed up Bierstadt in the bottom of it, and then I took a series of photos throughout the course of the day, the morning from 6 a.m. till noon, to track the direction of the sun as it traveled in the sky so that it can accurately rebuild that path of travel when I went back to make this image. I knew what I wanted to have this image look like, and this is pretty darn close to it. And I knew exactly how I was going to capture it when I got out there. And so that's how I did it. This is the sort of image that you kind of have to plan out well in advance. By well in advance, what do I mean by that? I'm recording this at the beginning of end of February, rather, and just realized I am 6 weeks behind planning my 2024 eclipse photo. So I should have started that at the beginning of January and did not. Anyway, last one I would have submitted was this portrait photo. This is a photo of my wife at a bar in Mexico called El Gato Negro. It's our favorite bar in Mexico. Weird thing. Never thought I'd hear that sentence come out of my mouth. Favorite bar in Mexico. I don't even have a favorite bar in America. Anyway, the owners there are super cool. Doesn't speak a lick of English. I don't speak any real Spanish. And he's like the coolest guy, one of the two coolest guys that I know down there in Mexico. The other one being the coffee shop owner. So he does speak very good English. Anyway, every time we go down to Mexico, we frequent both the coffee shop and El Gato Negro. And it's Dave Vuelta Tea Coffee there in Chapala, right down the street from El Gato Negro. And we start our day at one, we end our day at the other. It's pretty nice. So one thing you can notice about, if you've seen my Zeiss 55mm f1.8 Sony mount review, you probably saw this photo in there because that's where this is from. Is that? Yeah, because this would have been, so I start my photographic year November 1st of the previous year and ended October 31st. And that gives me the time that I need to triage all my photos and then get the photo books printed that I give to a couple of people every year at Christmas. So I stretch the definition of 2023 a little bit. This was taken in over Christmas in 2022. So a little bit fudging the rules there. Anyway, so those are some things about the photos that I submitted and what I would have done. What we're going to do now is we're going to go through the portfolios just in whatever order the file folders are in my computer. And I'll spend a few minutes on each because by now we've seen all of the photos. And then at the end, we'll get to the honorable mentions. So one thing before we jump in, I want to really hammer home with this. Everyone who submitted photos this year, who has submitted photos in previous years, showed improvement in the work they submitted this year. That in and of itself is something very important to be proud of, because every one of you grew creatively in terms of the types of subject, your technical accuracy, the creative approach to the way you made your images. I was, I said something similar to this last year, but this year, guys, you really took a huge step up in terms of the creativity that you put into your work. And I think you should all be very proud of the amount of effort you're putting into your photography. So we're going to start here with Stephen Boyce's portfolio. And an interesting sort of, it's not a cohesive portfolio by any stretch, right? And there's a lot of different photographic styles and approaches going on here. Color, black and white, portraits, non-portraits. What I'm still 100% certain is a glass plate for one of the photos, and what certainly looks like in the architecture shot, it could be a paper negative now that I look at it from further away. Hard to say for sure, either a paper negative or some very grainy film. Those are completely different things, so I'm not sure which it is. Anyway, it looks like a paper negative from far away, just based on the way that it was developed. But what's really interesting here is that I think the portrait photo is definitely digital, and the other ones, let me see this action photo. That looks like it's probably film. I could be wrong. That could be a digital photo as well. But we at least have a mix of digital and film and a little bit of our alternative process. So one of the really interesting things to me about Steve's portfolio here was the range of photographic skill and knowledge on equipment and also willingness to experiment that was exhibited throughout this whole portfolio. And that is a hard thing to achieve. There are photographers who are really good at one thing and do that over and over again, but the number of photographers who can do a lot of different things really competently is pretty small. From Richard Mengle, we have a mix of photos, mostly, I'd say 3 of 5, involving animals. All of them having this sort of like quietness about the photos. And this is one of the reasons I like the portfolio challenge, because we can talk about individual photos, but looking at them as a group is like a way different experience, because every photo in here, with the potential exception of the donkey in the action shot, has this sense of peacefulness and quiet and calm. And there's that cohesive nature running through the entire photographic portfolio. And so one of the things that always strikes me with each of the years that Richard has submitted a portfolio is that cohesive voice that spans all of the work that he submits. And it's the hallmark of a photographer who's pretty mature in the way that they go about creating images and capturing scenes. From Richard Mander, we have a series of different portfolio images here that we've talked about. We've talked about all of them, everyone. So anyway, all of the photos here are kind of like a different style and approach to the subject. And again, this was something that, by and large, I would say the majority of you did submit things which had different styles and different approaches to the subject. But this is one where it really stands out, because with the exception of the black and white photo, by and large, these feel like they're pretty intentional photos. There's a sort of reactionary feel to the action photo, but the architecture shot feels very intentional. The portrait feels very intentional, and so does the landscape. And all of them handle their subjects differently and in a way that is unique to, and I'd argue also in very many ways, appropriate to the subject of the photo. And so I think that's a really strong way a really good way to show a strong unified vision across the portfolio, because whereas in the previous one in Richard Mengle's, we saw that there's this common thread of like quietness and peacefulness. And in this one, we see this common thread of each photo approaching the subject in a manner that's unique to that subject and specific to it. Also, again, another thing that's not necessarily easy to do by any stretch of the imagination. From Mukul, we have a set of 5 photos which were like kind of all over the board. And so the ceiling on these, and I would say for that's the architecture was the strongest photo in this portfolio, followed very closely by the portrait, and then the landscape coming in a little bit behind that. 3 super, super strong photos. The black and white and the action didn't quite meet the same standard of the other 3 photos, rather, especially that portrait and the architecture shot, which are just like, the portrait I think I raved a lot about in that video because it's so fun and creative. And the architecture shot, if I recorded the architecture like earlier this week, I should remember this. I think that was 2nd place or something around there. It placed very well because it is exactly what you'd expect to see in a book about architectural photography. So, I mean, the ceiling quality on these was absolutely right there, through the roof, very, very well executed there. From Milan Cetic, we have our first all black and white. No, he did not have all black and white. So portfolio, but 5, again, all very different images, but with this uniform sort of feeling of, let's see. Well, we got an angel at a monument, which would be a cemetery. We've got 3 headstones. We've got a portrait of a person with their eyes closed in a very dark setting with a light shining on them. We've got this intentional, I'm going to give him this intentional motion blur landscape, and then this cloud trail the intentional motion blur black and white photo, and then the cloud trail over the city landscape. One of the things that really is interesting about this is the sort of consistent use of darker tones, even in the architecture shot of the 3 monuments, or the 3 headstones, whichever, which is the brightest of the 3 images. It's still kind of a dark tone because it's a cemetery photo, right? And so one of the things to think about when creating a portfolio is, let's say you were to take a portfolio and give it to an art gallery and say, here is why you should show me in your art gallery. One of the things a lot of art galleries look for, I'm told by people who have been in an art gallery with their work, is a unified theme or voice throughout the portfolio. And even though these photos are all different, there's still this unified sort of somberness. I think that might be a fair word to use across all of the photos. And it comes through in a few of them really strongly, and in the other 2, maybe just in the context of the rest of the portfolio. From Joshua Gaude, we have a portfolio with a bunch of different takes on different subjects. And one of the things that stood out here was the use of angles in, I'd say we could argue 4 of the photos, really, for sure. But if you look at the train photo, which was the action shot, and the architectural photo, which is the dam shot, and then we can go with the portrait photo because it's the dog. Those 3 photos, the subject is all closer to the photographer on the right side of the frame and then angling left. In the landscape photo, it's kind of the reverse of that. And then in the black and white, it's sort of a top down. So those two are kind of exceptions, but that was an interesting thing to see. And by the way, everyone does this. I noticed, for instance, in my own work that I tend to place things on the same rule of thirds lines and crossing points. I tend to have negative space in the same parts of the images. And it's not a criticism. It's not a bad thing to do something like that, to notice that you have the same eye for framing. It's a thing to be aware of, because that can inform how you do work, to either use that framing where it works really well, or to be conscious of the fact that you're using this framing approach or this image angle or whatever it is, subject angle again, and do I necessarily want to do that, right? So it was just an observation. I noticed that angle keeps repeating in these photos, and But at any rate, I think I went over each of these photos in some amount of depth in each video, and I think the portfolio by itself was also one that was enjoyable to look at. From Alexa D, we have a series of what all really do appear to be film photos, and another thing, like the film to digital ratio this year was off the charts. I can't remember a single year in any of the past contests where there were this many film photos and so few digital photos. Anyway, so one of the things that really stood out to me here is that the mix of black and white and color. The black and white images use tone pretty darn well across the board. The color images, the one of them of the landscape, I don't know if that would work well as a black and white photo. I don't think it would so much. I think that really does work better as color. The architectural photo, the detail of the building side, I think would be an interesting black and white photo to take or to convert and see how that looks. I think there's a very consistent use of tone in all of the images, and a really interesting combination of texture and lighting with that throughout all of the photos as well. And one of the things, it's really hard to have a good and consistent eye for black and white photography. And in this portfolio, one of the things that's exhibited even in the color photos is a sensibility which is pretty strong towards composition that will work well in black and white photography. From Andrej Bjelakovic, we have a portfolio of just a nice mix of subjects, right? We have 2 that are cities and then 3 that are detail shots of people. So there's that similarity between some of the shots, but they're handled in different manners. We have 2 environmental portraits, and one of which is saying something about the environment of the baby, and the other one which is definitely saying something about the subject of the photo. And then we have what I have to imagine is the staged action shot, which does a really good job of conveying a nice image meaning. And then we have the 2 cityscapes, one of which looks like a really thoroughly planned the landscape photo, and then the other architectural photo, which looks like which is a photo which sends a good message about new and old. And one of the things that came through with each of Andrej's photos, and I think I said this throughout the videos this week, is that every one of them seemed like it had something behind it that it was trying to convey. And I do hope that I picked up on those messages accurately throughout. It is challenging to have a portfolio, even of 5 images, where every image is trying to tell a story about something. And if you, quite honestly, think back to my portfolio at the very beginning, I'm going to say really one of those photos did a good job of telling a story about the subject. So I can't even say that I met the standard of having 5 photos that I would have submitted this year that told stories about the subject. So that's a very good thing to be able to say. From BlueMoonKissLove, we have a very interesting array of different types of photos and styles. So all of it, again, looks like film. Different uses of tonal range and color. I think the only person who submitted a color skew to the blue architectural photo this year. And then we have, wider landscapes, and then, of course, the very up-close photo of the bug. So a really interesting array of photographic styles and subjects and compositions in this portfolio rather. We talked a few portfolios ago about noticing common angles, and there's really nothing in this that I would say stands out as being common. Horizon lines are in different places, orientations are different. Even the framing style is different. So I think that's a really interesting way to approach different subjects, and it feels like this is probably a bit intentional to look at different subjects and ask, how can this photo be made to represent this subject well or fairly, something along those lines. So very nice work in that regard. And Cotton, we are going to now find out how that strategy worked out for Fancesco Coppola. And Francesco sent in a portfolio of 5, I think it is fair we can all agree, attractive women in different poses. So one of the things that really, okay, look, there are 2 things that pretty much jump off the page of each of these photos, but one of the things that I think is really interesting to notice is that each of the subjects, each of the models, has a different something in the background. Even the 2 models who are clearly in a setting with a bed, and the third one who, the blonde, who is, we could say, probably up against a window, very possibly in the same studio setting or a similar studio setting as the other 2. So we have 4 indoor shots and 1 outdoor. But even within all of these, there's different backgrounds, different use of lighting, different subject angles and poses, and in different ways, each one of the photos in here, and I think we really talked about it at length with the black and white shot, absolutely do something unique and interesting and handle their subject differently. It's really easy to look at. I'm not going to call out this photographer because I don't think it would be fair, but there's a photographer in my area who used to advertise at the mall that we go to when we want to just hit the food court for dinner or something. He's very talented. His photos are some of them are frankly incredible, but they all look the same. He does a thing. He does it exceedingly well. And what we have in this portfolio is we have a thing, and we have 5 different takes on the thing. And each of them is in their own way executed well. So really, I think one of the things I'll say, I'll reiterate that Francesco does consistently well is use light in a manner that flatters the subject that's being taken a photo of. And that's something, honestly, I don't even do it. I don't do it close to this well. I wish I did. Next up, from Jaeyeon Lee, we have a photo of a portfolio of different subjects with similar-ish takes in a few cases. Okay, I do like that there is this head-on approach to most of the subjects in this portfolio. The action shot of the person walking across the street feels like it might have been accidental, but the other 4 feel very intentional. And they are all photos that put you, as the viewer, right there looking at the subject's head on. And the way that they are structured, none of them feel like you're being a passive viewer to the scene. They all make you feel like you are in it and part of it. And I don't know exactly how that is achieved. There's no one element or photo structure in any of these images that I could point to and say, that is why I feel that way about this portfolio. It's just an observation, and I think something that is well done. There's a whole lot of life in each of these photos, even the one of the beach, which is, if we honestly, we talked about that extensively in the landscape video, but at any rate, yeah, that's a consistent thing across this whole portfolio that I really enjoyed. From Clay Williams, we have a really stunning portfolio with a whole bunch of different styles, different types of images, different compositions, different use of lighting and things like that. And in all of them, there are things that are really successful about the way that the photo was structured and captured, and also some things that that stood out as just really, honestly, kind of minor things. One of the things I really enjoyed about this portfolio is how Again, we've talked about lighting a few times. Lighting is different pretty much in all of these. If we look at the portrait photo, we've got most of the subject cast in shadow. The landscape is taken at sunrise, appears. The photo of the dog is got some backlighting, and maybe a little bit of internal scene lighting. And then the other two photos are daylight, but I'll tell you what, that architectural photo doesn't look like it's a super harsh daylight. Like maybe there was a cloud in this blocking the sun at that point, something like that. Either that or that's just a really good angle and all of the shadows are masked by the structure. But a good use of different lighting settings and what looks like, I think for all of these, natural light use as well. So well done on that, and well done on doing good composition with the subjects that you have at hand. From Frank Wouters, we have a portfolio which was quite frankly a personal favorite of mine. I thought this was absolutely stand out. The 2 week photos are the architecture and the landscape. They didn't feel like they had the same level of intention, and they just didn't feel like they had the same voice as the action, black and white, and portrait photos. The portrait photo with the black background, technically spot on, really good, very well executed. The black and white photos we talked about yesterday in that video, super creative way to create a portrait. Absolutely, really loved that shot. And then the action photo it just remains one of my favorites. Even though it's not action-y, it is just a ton of fun. So as a portfolio, if we discount the architecture and the landscape photos, which feel like they were kind of filler to get the whole portfolio talked about in this video, the other three have pretty similar structure. It's a uniform structure. There's the center framed portrait orientation subject of a person in some way, shape, or form. And that is the thing that really sets it apart is how much differently the human subjects were treated in each of those three photos, and the creativity that was brought, especially to the black and white and the action photos. From Joseph Schallmo, we have a really nice array of high quality, very skillfully executed photos across the board. And just every one of these, for something like the black and white especially, and the portrait especially, really stood out as being really technically competent, very good photos. And we talked a little bit about the portfolios having like a unified voice or being a little bit different. These ones didn't feel like they had a unified voice. In fact, if you had handed me these 5 photos, I would have looked at them and said, oh, these were taken by 5 different photographers, right? I obviously would have been quite wrong about that. But I'm not sure if that's not intended to be a criticism, just an observation. Actually, I don't really think there's that much in this video that's intended to be a criticism. Anyway, the ceiling on this portfolio with the black and white and the portrait really high. Those are just excellently executed photos that really turned out absolutely beautifully. From Ken Andersson, we have a series of, is this finally our first all black? No, Francesco, I think, had our first all black and white. Anyway, we have a series of 5 black and white photos for his portfolio, at least 2 of which were taken in the same space. But you know what? I'll tell you what, 3 of the photos I submitted in my portfolio this year were taken in Bilbao in the span of 3 days. So there is nothing whatsoever wrong with that. Anyway, really interesting way that the subjects in this portfolio are all handled differently. You can talk about a little bit about lighting with the fog or the bright light, full daylight, whatever it is, photo and shade. But what I mean is that we have the portrait photo, where the subject is having fun with the photographer, being engaged with the photographer and the camera. We have the landscape, which is sort of like a traditional landscape structure, and really shows the mining ruins that in the photo very well. Then we have this photo of the foggy, the black and white foggy photo, where the subject is sort of masked. In the landscape and the portrait and the other 2, the subject is very obvious. And then in this one, it's well behind this wall of fog. Then in the architectural photo, we have this one rigid thing among these round, haphazard sort of hills. And then in the action photo of the kid, we see the kid interacting with the world around it. And so each of the subjects is handled differently and in a way that feels natural to that subject. And that's a skill which is hard to learn and well executed here. From Luca Pasini, we have a really comprehensive portfolio of different types of subjects. And some of the work in here, by the way, by and large, pretty standout. The portrait and landscape photos especially turned out really beautifully. I think those were the strongest photos in the portfolio. The architecture was very close to being very well executed. I mean, it's a good photo, just like we talked about with the framing a little bit being off. Those three really stood out as being exceedingly visually interesting and well executed photos for all of the reasons we talked about in the videos for those. And so I think the overall execution of the really good photos was really great. Now on to the honorable mentions. So before I jump into these, the way that I evaluated these was I looked at each portfolio, and then I created the folders 1, 2, and 3 for honorable mentions. And then I started dumping photos into the honorable mentions and said, well, let them duke it out there. We got there, and I've been doing 3 honorable mentions for each video. And I got in there was 10 honorable mentions. I knew 2 of them would go on to be 1 and 2. So the last 5 portfolios we talked about were the 5 that were almost, I mean, they were in like the ones that really stood out the most. But these 3 are just edged them out just a little bit. We're going to start here with Gemista's portfolio, which is all about Pittsburgh. And this sort of unified voice about Pittsburgh, there are similar stylistic elements in here. The use of black and white in 4 of the photos, the graininess of the pictures really complements the subjects very well. Even the portrait photo, which if I remember what he said, it was a 4x5 shot. I think that's what I remember. Anyway, all of the photos here do a good job of showing the subject well and in an interesting manner. And I think that of the photos that we've seen from Gemista over the years with this contest, this is by far and away the strongest set of photos. So very well executed, and really was, especially the architecture shot of the city skyline and the landscape photo of the railway, and the portrait as well too. Very well executed portrait. I was really pretty jealous of a few of these, so nicely done. From Casey Schmidt, we have a really stunning portfolio with some great work. So get this off the plate right now. The weak shot was the black and white shot, but the other 4 really were captivating, and I think that comes through in the way that the 3 of them I think were honorable mentions or first and second place, and just very, very well executed photos and captivating image structure with them as well. So there were things that I liked about all of the photos in this. Every one of them felt like a unique and interesting way to tackle the subject itself, and all of them really did also a very good job of addressing the prompt that was set forth. Our final honorable mention comes from Brendan, and we have another all black and white photo portfolio with images that really, all of them were executed very well. And some of them, like especially the landscape and the black and white photo of the windows on the building, and also to a little bit of a lesser extent, the action and portrait photos. These were all really well done, visually interesting photos, great use of the black and white medium in all of the different ways that we talked about throughout this week. And every one of these photos just felt like it was an intentional shot that was like the prompt was known ahead of time, and let's go make something work for this prompt. In second place, now there are two people right now who are like, wait a second. I haven't heard my name yet. So, second place from Stephen Boski, we have a really absolutely fantastic portfolio that is dominated by phenomenal photos of people. Absolutely. All three of the photos, if just taking the photos of the people here as portrait photos, just top notch. I'd say all three of these would have landed in probably the top 10 of the portrait photos we saw throughout this whole contest this year. And there was some strong portrait competition this year. These just really all stood out as great ways to create photos about people. The architecture shot, well executed, as we talked about. Landscape was, not my favorite landscape of the year, but on balance, the weight of the three portrait photos here was done so staggeringly well, especially the photo of the portrait singer, of the portrait of the singer, that every one of them just felt like Stephen walked up to the subject, not literally, but approached the subject as an intentional way of creating a photo that would be flattering to the subject and be something that subject would be happy to have in their hand after the photo was taken. So really well done on the portrait work there. And finally, our winning portfolio comes from Antonio King. And across the board, super consistent, absolutely spectacular work. For me, the architecture shot, which was the city skyline, the landscape shot, those two were really good. But the portrait was the runaway best photo in this portfolio. I don't do a best photo of the year anymore because I think it's kind of redundant. But if I were to do one, it would be a coin toss between Antonio's portrait here of the guy in the workyard and Stephen Boski's portrait of the singer and Frank Wouters' portrait where he did the face meld of his subject. Those three to me are like all right there. Absolutely fantastic executions of portraits. So this was just across the board an absolutely magnificently well executed portfolio, and was really happy to see Antonio submit again and this year and just submit another portfolio of really phenomenal work. It is for me, you guys, and I'll be quite honest, when you guys submit photos that get better every year, and you submit photos with the quality that you guys submitted this year, I take that as a bit of a compliment, whether it's appropriate or not, that hopefully some of what I'm trying to do with this channel to help everybody who watches it improve their creative voice and improve their ability to connect to their subjects through their photography. I hope some of that is working well. So at any rate, thank you all very much for watching, and if we do this again next year, I expect we will, but we'll play it by ear at the end of this year. But if we do this again for the 2024, the contests, the categories will be the same. We're going to keep these same 5 categories for the foreseeable future. So if you want to start thinking about photos that you can take in these 5 categories over the course of the year, there you go. See you guys soon.